I turned 58 on a rainy Thursday. I had hoped for something quiet, a homemade dinner, a glass of wine, maybe a card. Nothing extravagant. I've never needed much, just sincerity. But instead of a celebration, I came home from my part-time job at the library to an empty house and a note taped to the fridge. My hands shook as I read it. I met someone else. I don't need you anymore. I've taken what was mine, and more. Don't try to find me. It was signed by Derek. We had been together for 9 years. Not married, but close enough. Close enough that I had let him manage our finances when I got sick 3 years ago. Close enough that I had trusted him with my house key, my accounts, my heart. He was 10 years younger, full of charm, with that kind of silver-streaked hair that made women look twice. I had met him at a friend's retirement dinner. He was the plus one of someone I didn't know, and somehow we ended the night laughing over shared cheesecake and a bottle of Chianti. It felt like fate. But now, fate felt like a cruel joke. The first thing I noticed missing was my grandmother's bracelet, an heirloom passed down for 3 generations. Then the emergency fund I kept in the drawer, gone. And when I opened the bank app, my heart dropped. The joint account had been drained. Not just his part. Everything. I sat down, numb. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't yet. Not because of the money. I've lived poor and I've lived comfortable, but because of the betrayal, the coldness of it, on my birthday. A few hours later, I called my sister Claire, who lived in New Mexico. We hadn't spoken much in the last few years, not since the inheritance mess after our mother died, but I didn't have anyone else. And when she picked up, her voice cracked with concern. "Is it Derek?" she asked. I hadn't said his name yet. I froze. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause. I didn't want to say anything, but when he came to visit last fall, he told me he was thinking of starting over, with someone younger. I told him he was a fool. I bit my lip so hard it bled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought he was just venting. I didn't think he'd actually do it. I'm sorry." The weight of it all hit me then. Everything I had ignored, the late-night texts he wouldn't explain, the sudden interest in business trips, the locked briefcase. I had been blind, but I wasn't going to stay broken. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at my dim reflection in the kitchen window, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Laura. Now, what are you going to do about this?" The morning after Derek left, I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't slept much, just tossed between anger and disbelief, turning over conversations in my head, remembering all the times I'd let things slide. The phone calls he'd take outside. The investments he never explained. I felt like a fool. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the framed picture of us from 3 years ago, smiling on a boat in Maine. He had his arm around me, his other hand shielding the sun. I looked happy. But now I wondered how much of that happiness was real. My first step was to call the bank. I spent an hour on hold, then another 2 talking to a woman named Dana who sounded younger than my daughter. She confirmed what I already knew. The joint account was drained 3 days ago. I had signed over full access to Derek when I was recovering from surgery. He was charming, helpful, reassuring. I had trusted him completely. "He didn't technically break any laws," Dana said gently, as if that would make me feel better. "He took everything," I said. "I know, I'm sorry." I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. Later, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the old leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in years. I used to write in it every night, before Derek. Before I gave up little pieces of myself, one compromise at a time. I turned to a blank page and wrote, "He thinks he won, but I'm still here, and I remember everything." That night, I started going through Derek's drawers. Most of his clothes were gone, but he'd left behind an old laptop. Password protected, of course. I tried a few obvious guesses. His mother's name, our anniversary. Nothing worked, but I noticed the sticker on the bottom, one from his last contract job. He had said it ended early, that they didn't appreciate his input. I was starting to see a pattern. I made a list of everything missing: the bracelet, my mother's antique brooch, cash from the safe, a few of my grandmother's silver pieces. He had taken not just money, but memories. Things he had no right to. Things I never thought I had to protect. Then I called Claire again. This time, we talked longer. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I asked questions. She hesitated, but eventually admitted something that chilled me. He asked about the house, she said. Last year, during Christmas, he asked if it was paid off. I didn't think anything of it then, but now... My heart sank. I hadn't checked the deed in years. The house was mine, left to me by my father. But if Derek had forged anything, or convinced me to sign something when I was medicated, I felt sick. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. What I wanted was the truth, the full truth. So I poured another cup of coffee, and I kept digging. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office. I didn't want to believe Derek could have gone that far, but my instincts were sharper now. The kind of sharp that comes from being burned. The clerk, a kind woman named Nancy, who looked like someone's aunt, pulled the records for my property. I had to wait 30 minutes, long enough to rethink everything about the last year. Derek had started being helpful with paperwork around the time I had pneumonia. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table, coughing so hard I could barely breathe, signing whatever he handed me. Nancy returned with a thin file. "The deed's still in your name," she said. I nearly cried. But then she frowned. "There was a request for a title transfer form issued 6 months ago. It wasn't filed, but it was requested. That's unusual." I took a copy and thanked her. My fingers trembled as I drove home. Back in my kitchen, I sat at the table and stared at the copy. The handwriting wasn't mine. It was clean, crisp, and cold. Derek hadn't forged it, yet. But he had planned to. That much was clear now. I opened the closet where he kept old electronics and found a dusty box with wires, chargers, and an external hard drive. The laptop still refused my password attempts, but the hard drive wasn't locked. I plugged it into my computer and waited. Inside, I found a folder labeled Contracts. Most of them were PDFs, employment agreements, consulting paperwork, a few freelance gigs. But then I saw one marked Vegas, Tasha. My stomach dropped. I clicked. Emails, screenshots, a flight confirmation, hotel receipts, pictures. There she was, a woman maybe half my age, curvy, tan, with long acrylic nails and a fake smile. In one photo, she was curled up on Derek's lap, holding a glass of champagne. The timestamp? 2 weeks before he left me. Another folder. Exit plan. It was meticulous. Notes on account numbers, scheduled withdrawals, reminders to pack specific items, my things. And at the end, a document titled, Laura's Weaknesses. I couldn't breathe. He had written it like a report. Crave stability, emotionally attached to family items, not financially savvy, history of illness == exploitable, guilt-driven. I slammed the lid of the laptop shut, nauseated. It wasn't a breakup. It was a long con. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a new list, of what he took, yes, but also of what I still had. My house, my name, my memories, my anger, and something else. A very good friend from high school, now a private investigator. His name was Vincent Hart. We hadn't spoken in years, not since my 40th high school reunion, but I still had his number saved under Vince P.I. I remembered his dry sense of humor and how he used to carry a small notebook in his pocket, long before cell phones were a thing. I called him late Friday morning. He picked up on the second ring. "Laura Ellis? I thought you fell off the map." "Not quite," I said, but someone tried to bury me under it. The conversation turned serious fast. I told him everything, from the note Derek left to the photos with Tasha to the file titled Laura's Weaknesses. Vince didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "You want revenge?" he asked, blunt as ever. "No," I said. "I want the truth, and maybe some justice. That I can work with." He agreed to meet me at my house the next morning. Before hanging up, he said, "Send me screenshots of anything you found. The more trail, the better." That night, I forwarded the emails, the receipts, and the documents I'd scanned. As I sorted the files, I noticed a recurring name in some of the consulting contracts Derek had saved. Marvin Little. The name rang no bells for me, but he showed up 3 times across different companies, all with generic email addresses. Something about it felt fake. Saturday morning, Vince arrived with a worn leather briefcase and a calm, focused energy I hadn't felt in days. He scanned the materials in silence, nodding occasionally, eyebrows twitching when he saw the exit plan folder. "This guy's no amateur," he muttered. "But he got sloppy, probably because he thought you'd never push back." He traced the flight confirmation from Vegas to a budget airline. "This booking was made under his real name. We can trace that." Then, flipping to the receipts, he jabbed a finger at the hotel logo. "And this place? Sunridge Inn? That's in Nevada. I know a guy who can pull surveillance if needed." I followed him into the dining room where I'd laid out a timeline. He leaned over it and whistled. "You've done half my job already." "I want to know if he's done this to other women," I said. "I have a feeling I wasn't the first." Vince nodded slowly. "We'll find out, and if this Tasha knows what he did, she might flip." We started calling the banks listed in Derek's documents, one in Chicago, another in Florida. All dead ends without legal grounds or a subpoena. But Vince had a workaround. He knew someone in private banking who could run quiet background checks. As he left, he handed me a small recorder. "Start documenting everything, phone calls, conversations, anything that feels off. You never know what piece fits the puzzle." After he left, I sat at the table for a long time, fingers resting on the recorder. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to power. And Derek had no idea it was coming. Vince called Monday afternoon. "I got something," he said. "Marvin Little isn't a real person. Or rather, he's not who Derek says he is." According to Vince, Marvin was listed as a business partner on a series of online shell companies, none of which had physical addresses or valid tax records. Most were registered under vague names: Grayhall Consulting, Pointway Global, Arkland Services. And all used virtual mailboxes scattered across multiple states. Classic fronts. "But here's the kicker," Vince added. 3 of these businesses have been dissolved in the last 5 years, after complaints were filed by women alleging fraud. All of them were middle-aged. All of them mentioned the same thing: a charismatic man who convinced them to invest in a joint venture. My stomach turned. "So I wasn't the first?" "No, you're just the one who didn't vanish quietly." We decided to dig deeper into the complaints. Vince had contacts in Arizona and Colorado who were able to pull redacted police records. In one file, I found a name: Hannah Rollins, 56, divorced, lost nearly $40,000. Another name: Patrice Greenwell, 61, widowed, lost a house. "I want to talk to them," I said. "Are you sure?" "If Derek's done this to others, I'm not just a woman who got her heart broken. I'm a witness." Vince gave me the number for Hannah first. I sat at the kitchen table, my hand trembling above the dial. Then I called. She answered with a wary hello. "Hi, this is going to sound strange, but did you know a man named Derek Moore?" Silence. Then, "What did he do to you?" We talked for nearly an hour. She told me about how he'd swept her off her feet during a conference in Scottsdale, about how he introduced her to Marvin on a video call, about how they planned to open a consulting firm together, only for him to disappear once her retirement fund was transferred. "And the police?" I asked. "They said without a signed contract or physical proof, it was a civil matter." I thanked her and promised to keep her updated. As I hung up, I felt the weight of our shared humiliation, but also a strange relief. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't crazy. The next step was Tasha. I found her Instagram, open account, full of glamour shots and cryptic captions. I messaged her directly. "We need to talk. It's about Derek Moore. I think you're in danger." I didn't expect a response, but 10 minutes later, one came. "Who are you? And what do you mean?" Just 6 words. But they told me everything. She didn't know. Tasha agreed to meet me the next afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. I didn't give her the full story over messages, just enough to make her curious, to make her wonder what she didn't know. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and high heels too tall for the cracked sidewalk. She looked like someone trying to outrun her own reflection. When she pulled them off, her eyes were wary, scanning me like I might be a threat. "You said you know Derek?" I nodded. "For 9 years, until he emptied my bank account and left me on my birthday." She blinked. "He told me you were bitter, that you were trying to destroy his career after he broke up with you. I smiled, just a little. Did he also tell you I signed over access to all my finances while I was recovering from pneumonia? That he took heirlooms from my family? That he's done this before? Tasha didn't say anything for a long time. She stared at her coffee like it might give her the answers. I thought I was the one, she said finally. He said he was starting over, that I made him feel alive. I'm sure he did say that. He has a script, Tasha. You're not the first, and if you stay silent, you won't be the last. I showed her the photos, of Hannah, of Patrice, of the fake contracts. She went pale. Then I handed her a folder Vince had helped me put together, with documents connecting Marvin Little to the scams. She took it with trembling hands. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because I don't want anyone else to feel the way I did, I said. Because I believe you didn't know, but now you do. She didn't say yes, but she didn't walk away either. That was enough for now. That evening, I called Hannah and told her what happened. She cried on the phone. You made her see, she said. You did what no one else could. Later that week, Vince called with more. We found another woman, same story, but this one's local. She wants to meet. Her name was Jean Crawford, 64, former nurse. Derek had used a slightly different approach with her, pretending to be a widower investing in elder care startups. She lost $18,000. The next weekend, we all met at my house, Hannah, Jean, and Tasha, who showed up without makeup, her hair pulled back in a quiet kind of surrender. We sat in my living room like war survivors comparing wounds. Jean brought a photo of Derek from a dinner party. Hannah had voicemails. Tasha, trembling, pulled out a copy of a fake lease Derek had convinced her to co-sign. We weren't strangers anymore. We were witnesses. Vince returned to my house the next morning, carrying a large binder and 2 manila envelopes. He placed them on my kitchen table with quiet purpose. Your case, he said. Ours now. Inside the binder was everything we had. Bank records, forged documents, photographs, timelines, transcribed voicemails, screenshots of texts and emails. He had organized it meticulously, labeled with color-coded tabs and cross-references. Jean had even managed to dig up a letter Derek had written her from a supposed business trip, complete with a fake company letterhead, identical to the one used in Hannah's investment package. We've got patterns, Vince said. Same language, same pitch, same timing. If this were a puzzle, we've got the whole edge built and a good chunk of the middle. But is it enough? I asked. Vince gave me a long look. It's not a slam dunk, Laura. He was careful. Everything stops just short of outright fraud. No official contracts, no recorded promises. But with enough testimonies, enough overlap, a district attorney might see something worth pursuing, especially if we show intent. That's when I made the call to Pamela Reyes, a local attorney specializing in financial abuse and fraud. I explained our situation. She didn't rush. She listened. You'd be surprised how many men like this are out there, she said. They bank on shame. They rely on silence. We met her the next day in her office, wood-paneled walls, a stained glass lamp, and a plaque that read, Justice is earned, not given. Jean, Hannah, Tasha, and I sat across from her like students at a seminar. Pamela took notes, flipped through Vince's binder, asked the right questions. At the end, she exhaled and leaned back. You have the beginnings of a case, she said, but we'll need to move fast. He's still on the move, and if he senses you're coming for him, he'll disappear. I felt it then, urgency, the clock ticking. That evening, I called Claire, my sister. We hadn't spoken in days, and I needed to tell her everything. I expected hesitation, maybe judgment. Instead, she said, I've been waiting for this version of you. I thought you were angry with me, I admitted. I was, she said, but not anymore. Just be careful. Tasha called later that night. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I blocked him, she said. I also canceled the card he gave me. He's going to be furious. Good, I replied. Let him feel some of what he gave us. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But the next morning, Vince called with a tone I hadn't heard before. Tight, urgent. He's back in town. He checked into a motel near the old highway, Vince said. Cash. No ID used, but the clerk remembered him. Same smirk, same attitude. Said he was just passing through. I felt something twist in my gut. Not fear, something sharper. Anticipation. Why would he come back? I asked. Maybe he thinks you've cooled down, or maybe he left something behind. Either way, we have a window. Pamela advised caution. If he senses you're building a case, he'll vanish. Or worse, he'll go after one of you to scare you into silence. So we played it smart. Jean, Hannah, Tasha, and I met in my living room again. This time, it felt different, like strategy, not grief. We weren't there to comfort each other. We were preparing for war. I still have that old recorder Vince gave me, I said. If I can talk to him, get him to admit anything, we might get what we need. Hannah looked alarmed. You'd really meet him? Alone? I nodded. He thinks I'm weak. Let him think it. That's our advantage. Tasha reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. He texted me this morning, said he missed me, asked if I'd meet him. That was our opening. Together, we crafted a reply. I've been thinking about you. Maybe we could talk. Same place as before? Tasha sent it. Less than 5 minutes later, he responded. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., don't be late. It was surreal watching it unfold. This man who had caused so much harm, who had stolen from all of us, thought he still held the strings. But this time, we were the ones writing the script. The next day, we prepared carefully. Tasha would cancel last minute. I would go in her place, wearing a hat and sunglasses. Vince would be nearby, recording from his car. Pamela gave me legal lines to bait Derek into incriminating himself without tipping him off. I arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe was nearly empty. I ordered tea and waited. When Derek walked in, my breath caught, but not from nerves, from anger. He looked almost exactly the same tailored jacket, same easy swagger. He slid into the booth like nothing had happened. Well, well, he said. You look good for someone who tried to ruin my life. I smiled slowly. Funny. I was going to say the same to you. He laughed. You always did have bite. Maybe that's why I liked you. I kept my voice even. So, was any of it real? He shrugged. Define real. You needed someone. I filled the role. It's not like you were forced. I leaned forward. You stole from me, from others. I borrowed, he said. People give freely when they think it's love. And there it was, on tape, cold, smug, and perfect. You should leave town, Laura, he added, eyes narrowing. You're digging too deep. I stood, heart pounding. You have no idea how deep this goes. Then I walked out. Vince followed me to the car. We got it, he said. It's enough. Back at home, we played the recording for Pamela. She nodded once. It's time. By the following Monday, Pamela had already filed the formal complaint with the district attorney. The wheels of justice were turning, slow but deliberate. Vince handed off the binder of evidence, along with the full transcript of the cafe recording, including a time-stamped certification from a third-party notary to ensure admissibility. The women and I gathered once more, this time not in secrecy or sorrow, but in preparation. We weren't hiding anymore. We may have to testify, Pamela warned. If this goes to trial, the defense will dig into your lives, try to make you seem gullible, weak. We were vulnerable, Hannah said firmly, but we're not weak. We all nodded. Even Tasha, whose once cautious gaze now carried something sharper. Determination. A week passed, then another. Then came the call from Pamela's office. Derek had been served. He'd been picked up at a gas station just outside of town, where he was spotted trying to book a one-way ticket online at a roadside terminal. He didn't resist. In fact, the officer said he smirked the entire time, as if none of it mattered, that it was just another phase, another inconvenience. But this wasn't a phase. Derek was charged with fraud, theft by deception, and unlawful appropriation of funds, charges spanning 3 states, thanks to the women who had come forward. Pamela had coordinated with other attorneys representing Hannah and Jean. Even Tasha's statement, though legally murkier due to her age and implied consent, added weight to the case. It painted a pattern, a deliberate, repeated act of manipulation for personal gain. Claire flew in from New Mexico the day before the first court hearing. When she stepped into my kitchen, her arms folded me into a hug that made my knees go weak. "You're not the same person you were 2 months ago," she said, stepping back. "You got your fire back." "I had to," I replied. "He almost took everything." We arrived at the courthouse together. Jean and Hannah met us on the steps. Vince, standing by the entrance, handed me a manila folder with the final set of printouts. "He'll see you today," he said. "Just remember, you've already won." Inside, Derek sat behind the defendant's table in a wrinkled suit that looked borrowed. He glanced at me once. For the first time, there was no charm in his eyes, no performance, just silence. The judge read the charges aloud. The courtroom didn't gasp or shift. It wasn't a movie. But the weight of those words filled the space. When I took the stand, I spoke clearly, firmly. I told the truth. About the pneumonia, the bank account, the heirlooms, the betrayal. I ended with this. He didn't just steal money, he stole trust, and I want to make sure he never has the chance to do it again. When I stepped down, I didn't look back. The trial lasted 6 days. Derek's lawyer tried every trick, blaming miscommunication, painting the women as willing participants, even implying we were exaggerating for sympathy. But every time they tried to twist the story, the facts pulled it back into place. Emails, voice recordings, paper trails, consistency. Most damning of all was his own arrogance. The very thing that once charmed us became his downfall. On the stand, he denied everything, but his tone was too polished, too rehearsed. The jury saw through him. Everyone did. The verdict came in on a Friday afternoon. Guilty, on 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of theft by deception, and 1 count of attempted title transfer through forgery. He was sentenced to 6 years in state prison, with restitution ordered to the victims, though we all knew the money wouldn't undo the damage. That wasn't the point anymore. Outside the courthouse, we stood quietly. Jean held my hand. Tasha wiped away silent tears, not of sadness, but release. Hannah smiled for the first time in weeks. Claire was beside me, arms crossed, head high. "You did it," Vince said. "You all did." We didn't cheer, we didn't celebrate, but we felt something deeper, peace. Not just because Derek was behind bars, but because we had faced him. Together. Weeks passed. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something new. Tasha enrolled in night classes to study social work. Jean started volunteering at a women's shelter. Hannah, after some hesitation, gave a radio interview under a pseudonym to share her story. I went back to the library, part-time again, but with different eyes. I noticed women who walked a little too carefully, smiled a little too tightly, and I started speaking up. Pamela helped us form a local support group. We met twice a month in a community hall. At first, it was just us. Then 5 women, then 12. Each one came with their own version of Derek, or someone like him. Every time I looked around that room, I saw strength where others had tried to carve weakness. One evening, as I was packing up the chairs, Claire came in with a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Something that belonged to Mom," she said. "I found it when I was cleaning out the attic. I think she'd want you to have it." Inside was a letter, my mother's handwriting. "For my Laura, you have always been the quiet one, but never mistake your calm for weakness. You will know your strength when the time comes, and when it does, don't hold back." I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my heart. Derek thought he had buried me. He thought I would fold, hide, vanish. Instead, I stood up. I looked him in the eye, and I walked away stronger than I'd ever been.